Hi, and welcome to the Health Begins with Mom show. I am Dorit Balvanov, your host. On this podcast, I will share insights and interviews on health, parenting, and explore the question of what does it take to thrive as women, wives, and mothers. Now, let's get going with today's episode. Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Health Begins with Mom podcast, the place where we talk about how to thrive as women, wives, and mothers. If you are listening in real time, I want to remind you of a webinar I'm running tomorrow and on Wednesday, October 24th and 25th, called How to Have a Healthy Meal Every Day Even When You Don't Have the Time. I hear again and again that moms struggle with managing their time in the kitchen. They either don't have enough time to cook, plan, or even eat healthy. So in this webinar, I will teach you how I do it and how my clients do it as well. So please join us and educate yourself on how to streamline this process for yourself, because whether you like it or not, food is something you will have to deal with for the rest of your life, and feeding your child is here to stay for at least the next 18 years of his or her lives. I've created 2 time slots for you. October 24th, Tuesday, we will meet at 1 p.m. and October 25th, we will meet at 9 p.m. It's a Wednesday, and both times are in Eastern Standard Times. All right, let's jump into today's interview. Have you ever heard the saying, 7 billion diets for 7 billion people? This is a quote from Julie Daniluk's book, Meals That Heal Inflammation. These 7 words resonate with me deeply because after working with women and children for the past 5 years, I can tell you that although there are some common factors, for the most part, people are different, and food isn't and shouldn't be seen as black and white. Our bodies constantly communicate with us through various channels. Some of these channels can be emotional and some can be physical. Today, we are talking about physical channels of communication, and in particular, food sensitivities or allergies. Did you know that things like itchy skin, hair loss, brain fog, bloating, constipation, and even body odor could be symptoms of sensitivities to food? When it comes to helping your child or yourself with a food sensitivity or food allergy, there's very little we can do conventionally. I've heard many moms complain about doctors who describe these symptoms as it is all in your head. Now, my intention here is not to go against conventional medicine, of course, but to educate you about the other things you could do to help yourself or your child with food sensitivities or intolerances. Today on the show, I'm talking with Rebekah Fedrowitz, who is a board-certified holistic nutritionist and mom to an energetic toddler. She is passionate about helping women find hope and direction as they navigate the overwhelming world of health for themselves and their families. Through her virtual wellness company, You Are Well, Rebekah teaches natural principles that can be applied to the way we eat, think, and live to positively impact both short-term and long-term health. Rebekah started her career in the health and wellness industry. In 2005, she has had the opportunity to impact the health of individuals all over the country through private consulting, group programs, and health-based cooking classes. And today on the show, we talk about the difference between a food sensitivity, food intolerance, and food allergies. Why are there so many issues with food these days? How can we moms help children with food sensitivities? We also talk about best testing for food sensitivities, intolerances, or allergies for children and adults. We also we talk about the elimination diet and how to do it, and also the process to go through if you suspect there is a sensitivity or intolerance to food, either with yourself or with your child. So this episode is jam-packed with some really informative information, and I recommend for you to listen all the way through. And if there is someone who you know and you suspect having these symptoms, then please do this favor for them and share this episode with them. All right, guys, let's jump into today's interview with Rebekah. Here, hi, Rebekah.
Hi, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about food sensitivities, which I think all of us can learn a lot from. And just before we jump into this topic, I wanted you to introduce yourself and talk about your journey and how you got into the health industry.
Yeah. Okay, great. You gave a lot of an introduction. Thank you. That was wonderful. I am Rebekah. I am a mom to a 2-year-old who is, a workout in and of himself, keeping up with him. And I'm a wife to a wonderful man. We move around a lot. So right now we live in Connecticut, although we're moving in the fall. So, crazy life as it is. What got me into the industry? Years of struggling with my own health issues that no one seemed to be able to really help or even identify. I would go in and say I'm having afternoon headaches, and they would run all these tests, and then they'd say, you're normal, just take some Tylenol and get over it.
Yeah, it's all in your head.
Right, exactly. And then the hormonal imbalances, which were crazy. And again, it was a Band-Aid solution. They said, take some birth control and you'll be fine. It'll help balance it out. And eventually, after a few of these really what are known as normal symptoms kept happening, and I just felt like things were getting worse than better. And I was in my early 20s at the time. And I just thought, oh my goodness, I feel like 40-something women who are menopausal don't feel as bad as this. And I just knew I couldn't live with that. And so I started doing research and discovered natural health and holistic nutrition. And that's when I decided to ditch my previous career, go back to school, and dedicate my life to this.
I love that. Okay, so I wanted to share with you something that I've learned through my own practice, and it's through my work with parents. I'm realizing that we're all sensitive to something. We just don't know what it is, and we also get used to living with various symptoms and reactions. So for me, for example, whether it is being bloated after every single meal, to having hives all over the face and even sometimes the body, like the décolleté area and the shoulders, or even having a bad body odor, et cetera, right? So can you talk a little bit more about how how can a food reaction impact our health, and where should we even start when it comes to helping ourselves?
Great question. And to your point as to everyone having a reaction, it's very uncommon that I see someone who doesn't. It's super, super prevalent these days. And where to start? I think that because of the widespread nature of food sensitivities and the issues that can manifest from digestion to the brain, to the skin, like you were saying, the body odor, even bumps and hives, even energy and sleep, right? Like any number of symptoms can manifest themselves because of a food sensitivity. And we can become so used to them that we don't even notice them anymore. And so the best place to start is saying, do I feel as good as I want to feel? And if I don't, then how can I at least observe and be my own detective and discover these issues that are present? And then from there, deciding whether or not it's worth exploring food sensitivities to see if the issues remedy themselves.
Okay. So, I think we're throwing these terms like allergy or intolerance or food sensitivity. Can we do a little bit of like sorting? Can you talk about the difference between food allergy, intolerances, and food sensitivities?
Yes, definitely. So food allergies, and I'll try to keep this short and in layman's term. Food allergies elicit the immune system in a fairly immediate reaction. So the immune system has multiple components, if you will. So if you think about like the military, for example, it's not just the military. There's the Army, there's the Navy, there's the Air Force, there's the Marines, for example. And so our immune system is sort of like that. There are different arms of the immune system, and a food allergy elicits the IgE response, which is that immediate response, which we often see as things like throat swelling, lip swelling, and some sort of an anaphylactic reaction. Typically very immediate, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 minutes to 12 minutes, and often could be life-threatening. Food intolerances are on the other end of the spectrum, where they don't elicit an immune response, and they are because of a digestive imbalance or a lack of an enzyme. So enzymes, which we all have in our digestion, they are catalysts for digesting and breaking down foods. So without the presence of a specific enzyme, we can't break down the related food. Most common food that we hear of is intolerance, is lactose intolerance. So lactose is a sugar in milk products, and lactase is the enzyme necessary to break down lactose. So some individuals are deficient either partially or completely in the lactase enzyme. Therefore, when they eat foods containing lactose, they don't break that food down, and that causes symptoms and discomforts within their digestion. So typically speaking, with intolerances, we notice that as like gas and bloating and truly digestive symptoms. And then the third, maybe a little lesser known issue, is food sensitivities. So food sensitivities do in fact elicit the immune system, but not in the same way as food allergies. So I've talked about the different arms of the immune system. The food sensitivities engage the IgG immune reaction, which is a delayed reaction. And we don't always see those reactions. I mean, it can be 12 hours, 72 hours. Some people even see it delayed up to 5 days or more, because an IgG response, the antibodies that are produced because of that response, can stay present in the body for up to 23 days. So what we're usually looking at with a food sensitivity is a slightly delayed reaction, 2 hours, 12 hours, 72 hours, somewhere in that frame. And the symptoms for the food sensitivities are the hardest to detect because it's really related to inflammation. And so any number of conditions, I mean, if you even Google search inflammation, you'll see it's one of the most serious conditions we can have in our body. And food sensitivities ultimately create that inflammation because of the immune response, which then manifests itself through acne, body odor. It can even be in the digestion because of the amount of immune cells that are actually present in the digestion, and so on. I mean, the list is definitely very extensive.
Okay. So, I'm just thinking about something you mentioned earlier, and it is that, most of us are dealing with some sort of sensitivity. So I'm just wondering, why is it so? Like, why are so many of us so sensitive to foods these days? What's in the food supply, or maybe the environment, has changed?
So great question, and one that I think I could probably talk on for hours and hours. So here's what I'll say. First off, the food that we eat today is not the same as we have always historically eaten because of genetic modification, because of fertilizers, pesticides. If you know anything about gardening, you know that the best way to get the most out of your food is a 7-year cycle. And so if you look historically, we used to move, right? You would see these trends of people kind of migrating through whatever country they're in. So if you take the United States, for example, they started on the East Coast and eventually slowly migrated out because the soil became depleted. We don't have that option nowadays. So we have soil depletion and artificial soil replacement. We have the fact that our foods are picked in an unripe state and shipped to us from any number of locations. We face genetically modified foods, which, while it seems and appears to be the same on the outside, the genetic composition of the food is actually different, genetically modified, as the name implies. And so when you think about eating that food, if the genetics are different, has the body had time to adapt and evolve to it changing the mechanisms that are breaking those things down? So, for example, one that's very common is soy. So soy today looks very different than soy may have looked 100 years ago. But the rapid change in the genetics of soy, it's been so much faster than the way that the body can change. So what the body is looking for, what the body is scanning for, and the brain essentially will signal, oh, this genetic food is here, so therefore we need this enzyme. The brain doesn't even recognize that food anymore, and so we can't break it down. And anytime we don't break our foods down, it can lead to digestive damage, food sensitivities, and more. And then finally, I think the other issue is stress. I mean, we are overwhelmingly stressed, and stress can absolutely impact our digestion and inhibit our digestion, which when we don't digest our foods, again, it can lead to digestive damage and subsequently food sensitivities.
Okay, thank you. I just want to shift gears a little bit and talk to you about the role that we moms play when it comes to the health of the family. So I strongly believe that as moms, we have to be our family's sort of like doctors and detectives. So I was wondering if you could give some examples, maybe some of your own or people you've worked with, of how moms' detective skills helped their children or, their spouses, or maybe even themselves with, some symptoms that they couldn't really understand where they're coming from. But because they felt like something is going on, they were able to help the family.
Yeah. So I do think moms, we are triaging our children and our spouses and ourselves all the time, right? We decide when it's time to see a practitioner, make a dietary change, go to the doctor, whatever that might be. And so I think my biggest piece of advice here is never settle for mediocre health. It doesn't have to be mediocre. And so whatever that looks like for you, whether it's your child throwing temper tantrums all of a sudden and you don't really understand why, and it's not just a 2-week phase where they're mentally developing and then it goes away, but just like you feel like you can't control your child's behavior, to skin conditions or diaper rashes, or even in yourself. Do you have the energy to keep up with your family? Do you feel like you're suffering from brain fog and just blaming it on your circumstances or the fact that you're not getting enough rest? Like, looking at those things and saying, you know what, this just doesn't feel normal to me, or it's normal because we're used to it, but I don't want to accept this as normal. I've certainly seen this with my clients, with myself. My son has asthma. It was genetically passed down. It runs in my family. And I know that when he eats certain foods, it triggers it. And so we just don't eat certain foods because it helps keep his asthma well controlled without not even any supplements specific to it. It just naturally stays controlled because the inflammation in his body is down. And I look for signs and symptoms from any number of foods. And it's not always the obvious ones like wheat or dairy. Sometimes it can be watermelon, for example, or a dried fruit. It could be a sulfite in a dried fruit that creates a trigger. Essentially, if you see a change, or if it's always been that way, if you feel like you can't seem to fight sinus infections, ear infections, diaper rash, then start exploring. It's definitely worth noting those things.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. So let's say I have some symptoms and I've decided to start a certain healing process. So usually the next step would be doing some sort of testing. Can you talk about what kind of testing is available for people? And, maybe you can mention if there is a different testing for adults and children.
Yeah. So the easiest, most approachable testing is an elimination diet. And this is usually very safe for both children and adults. Obviously, it may be slightly different for children based on their immediate diet, but the process of removing certain foods from your diet for a period of time and then adding them back in to test them and essentially challenge them to see if a response happens. It is not a diet in the sense of what we have commonly associated that term with today, such as the paleo diet or a diet that like the keto diet or something like that, where you might see an end result that comes from it, such as weight loss, but rather a short-term protocol where you're using your food, the foods that you consume, your diet, as an exploration and discovery method. In addition to that, there are IgG blood tests that are available. Not all of those are created the same. I've certainly seen some that are very accurate and really helpful, others not so much. The prick test doesn't seem to work very well, but there's blood draw tests that your practitioner can send off. And it does look for basically elevated immunoglobulins related to certain foods, antibodies related to certain foods. And so that can help us explore whether or not there's inflammation because of the food that we're eating. And that's particularly helpful for those people who are sensitive to weird things like I mentioned, watermelon or spinach. And I have seen that. But the elimination diet is the easy way to start this at home.
Okay, we will talk about elimination diet because there's so much to learn, and I do want you to sort of maybe walk us through how to do it the right way. But before we do that, I wanted to share maybe a story that's happened to me, my own personal experience. So my daughter was, she started having these weird eczema-like patches on her skin, and she's had them. Mostly she has them during the winter time, and then they disappeared throughout the summer. So I thought maybe, her skin is dry, whatever. And I see that, consistently every single year they come back, and then whatever, different family member encouraged me to take her to the allergy doctor, which I did. And the test, the prick test, was completely useless.
Yeah.
And I feel like I traumatized my child because I had to spend 30 minutes to just convince her and explain that the pricking is not hurtful. And after I've done all of that, she went through the testing, and the testing showed basically nothing.
Right.
And I feel like these are the options that, as moms we have with the medical system today. Mm-hmm. If you have allergies or some sort of symptoms, you'd go to the doctor. So you go to the allergy doctor, but then the testings that they have available is completely useless. And not even that, when I asked her about something I could do with food, she looked at me like I'm a crazy person. What are you talking about? Right? So can you talk about how can we as moms navigate that confusion that there is? Because the elimination diet is something that we do holistically, correct?
Yes. I mean, the elimination diet can be done in a traditional medicine setting, a conventional medicine. I've seen various practitioners do it, but it's not always everyone's first thought. And in various, just like you could come to 15 different holistic nutritionists, and we may approach things in 15 slightly different ways based on our individual training. I think doctors are the same. I have seen some conventional doctors immediately think diet, although it is very unusual.
Right.
Whereas natural practitioners, whether it's a naturopath or an integrative physician or a holistic nutritionist or something like that, almost immediately go to that. In terms of what you can do, I think education is key. Surrounding yourself with a community, with people who can and know what the options are, right? And knowing that if you walk in to an office and they make you feel crazy or make you feel like that's not an option, it doesn't mean that's it's not your only choice. I mean, you wouldn't just go and buy a car at one car dealership. You would explore your options, because if you go to one car dealership, they're going to make it sound like their cars are the only cars to buy and they're the best in the world. And you don't just take their word for it. You look at consumer research, you check out other dealerships. And I think we should sometimes approach our health in that way. Get outside opinions, talk with practitioners, talk with other moms, be in a community. And that's like, I have an online community because I believe in people saying, what have you done? It doesn't mean it's what I have to do, but just having that option of going, what have other people done? What choices do I have? Where can I turn to be sure I do know all of my options? And thankfully, there's more and more online options. Like, that's why I've started my business in this virtual space, because not everyone lives in a place where they can find someone who can help them. And there are more, I know 3 different lab companies that I work with who drop ship the finger prick test right to their door. And so they're able to do that at home, which is amazing. And it makes it's a blood draw, but not in the way that you have to go to an office. It's not the prick test like the allergy prick test. It's like a finger prick, like a hemoglobin test, but it's for food sensitivities. And it actually has a pretty great rate of accuracy. So there are plenty of options. So knowing your options, doing your research, and surrounding yourself with a community who maybe think a little outside of the box, so that you at least have people to say, well, here's what I've done and here's what's worked and what hasn't, just so that you have a good idea of what may work for you.
Okay. So you mentioned those testing. Would you be able to provide me with the links to those companies so I can share them in the show notes?
So one is Everlywell. The others you actually have to I have to order them. So I order them for my clients. Mm-hmm. Everlywell is available to anyone to buy online. It's not as comprehensive as one of the other tests that I do. 2 of the other ones, but and basically what I do is I communicate directly with the company and have them send the test to the client directly, so that basically it makes it easier for them to access it from home.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is that if you decide to go the testing route, it's better for you to work with a nutritionist so that someone will be able to decode the findings, right?
So yeah, you want to work with some type of practitioner. And, thankfully, most of the food sensitivity tests, like the ones that I'm authorized to order, it's all written up and it's really wonderful to the client in terms of how it's presented. Various practitioners will have various testing options, but I do recommend working with a practitioner, because even then, let's say you get your results in the mail and it says you can't have cow's dairy or spinach, or it might say something else too. And you go, but wait, what does that mean? And what do I look out for? And how do I structure my diet? Because so many people have not just 1 or 2. Most people will come back with 10 or 15, and then they feel at a loss. And so that's where just simply removing foods, but not replacing them with good foods that work for you, can lead to malnutrition and deficiencies. So it is important to work with somebody that can help you kind of customize that.
Okay. So let's talk about the elimination diet. I have to tell you, Rebekah, when I went to nutrition school, and every time we learned about the elimination diet, I resisted it so much because it's so overwhelming to me. To me, basically what it means, and I hate that it has such a negative name.
I agree.
Elimination diet. It meant to me basically stop eating everything and just drink water. And I think a lot of, when you, at least me, when I share that with my clients, there is a huge resistance. That's the first thing. That's the first energy I sense. And I think, you know what I mean? So can you maybe walk us through the first baby steps to do when you're starting an elimination diet? And maybe you can talk about it in a way that is practical, but also positive and actually feels doable for listeners.
Yes. So the negative connotation, man, you have no idea how relevant that is to me. we are just launching the elimination diet program with You Are Well. And it struggled so much with calling it the elimination diet because of that negative connotation. And that's how we landed on the 3-phase food solution plan for total body health, which sounds so much more approachable. And yet it's excessively accurate. You know, it really is this 3-phase approach. And what you're doing is you're using food and the discovery of foods in order to achieve that total body health, or at least take the steps towards that total body health. And so, yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is, number one, there's so much about elimination diets online. And in some ways, I almost didn't even create an elimination diet program because there's so much. And yet, over the course of the years, as I've worked with clients, almost all of them have needed to do an elimination diet. But many of them, it was not their first time because they tried to do it based on mismatched information and it wasn't successful. And then it is miserable, right? Like it is a doable diet, but you don't want to have to repeat it over and over again. So I think the first step is mental preparation, understanding the reality that you do not eat. You actually eat a full day's worth of food every day. And it can be delicious food. Like, this is not chicken and steamed broccoli and brown rice. Like, you can actually eat, you know, you can still have most of your spices and herbs. It takes a little bit of mental adjustment. It takes planning and preparation. It takes, you know, people who succeed at the diet don't just jump in. You know, they get the diet from me, we talk about it in our session, and then the next day they go home and they start it. And I'm like, oh no, I know you're going to be back here in a week going, so that went well. People who take it home, they start to practice, they start to look at restaurant menus, they start to think through the foods they're buying and look up recipes and have an opportunity to really see how there are actually so many foods that you can eat. There's just certain ones you can't during that first period of time. When they practice and prepare, and when they mentally shift it to that positive diet where it isn't this dreaded thing you have to do, they're so much more successful. And so that is most definitely the first step.
Okay. And so working, let's say I've decided that that it's important to me, I need to do something, and I choose the elimination diet route. So what are some of the most common foods people have issues with? Have to be eliminated.
Well, there's a whole, like a long list that needs to be eliminated. I say a long list. It can vary person to person. And that's where, like in the elimination diet, the You Are Well elimination diet program, we talk about how you can customize it. There are common allergens such as gluten, dairy, eggs, soy, corn, for example. Those are an automatic because you want to make sure that anything that's a common allergen is out of the diet for testing purposes. But again, there are foods that aren't necessarily common, and then there are foods that react for different reasons, and that's where those IgG testing comes in, because you can't eliminate everything, right? You're not going to sit there and eliminate kale and spinach and apples right away, even though those foods could be an issue. So how do you walk through that process? But those common ones are gluten and dairy, soy, corn, and eggs are big ones. That if you search common food allergens, those are going to be your top foods that show up.
Okay. And one more thing that I would add as maybe a professional is you could do this process on your own, but you would lose your mind, your sanity, because if you're trying to figure out things and learn and also raise little people, you will lose your mind. So I always recommend, if you are choosing to work on something, heal something that needs to be healed, work with a practitioner, because this is the person who you can go to when you need the support, when you're having the mental breakdown. It's when you're making those meals and you have no idea which ingredients to use. And it's also when you are cooking, and you're not just cooking for yourself, right? In most cases, it's you're cooking for your kids, you're cooking for your spouse, you're cooking for yourself. And so I think you need to have that person who you can constantly bounce back to and sort of realign yourself when you're losing it, right? Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. I think that support is key. And that's like doing an elimination diet with a buddy is amazing, actually. So if you've got a friend that needs to do it together too. I mean, because it's true. I like you, I resisted doing it forever and ever. I was like, oh, this sounds just so miserable. And the funny thing is the first time through was a little challenging. I went back and did it again several years later, and I had to laugh. I was like, this actually isn't even that different from my day-to-day anymore. There are selected ingredients I don't have. But when you have a foundation of healthy eating, when you have support, when you've been there and you have that person to say, hey, is this food okay? And they say, no, but here's an option. Here's a replacement. When you know those options for replacement and you have that support, it makes it so much better and so much easier.
So I'm just also curious, when, doing that entire process, what is your take on supplements, vitamins, probiotics, and enzymes? Like, how do you intertwine these in the protocol?
Yeah, great question. It can vary person to person depending upon the severity of their digestive issues and their symptoms. I do think having like the Thorne MetaPro Vegan is what I recommend, like a good quality protein powder that's elimination diet safe. And it can be a meal replacement, because you never know when you're going to be running out the door and you go, oh my gosh, I haven't had breakfast and I can't have eggs. Well, I'm testing right now. And what do I have that's appropriate? Or my whey protein powder is no longer okay. Do you have that kind of a go-to? Probiotics can vary. I don't recommend starting anything at the beginning of the elimination diet. So I recommend either having it already in your system or waiting until you can actually get through that initial phase and you can almost test the supplements. But I use like gut anti-inflammatory supplements if they happen to have reactions. I do think essential fatty acids are super helpful because of their natural anti-inflammatory properties. But I'm very cautious and leery of using too many digestive supplements because it can mask the symptoms associated with a food sensitivity. So like if you're taking a digestive enzyme, for example, that helps break down, we'll go back to the lactose intolerance example. If you're taking an enzyme that helps break down lactose, will it break it down so you don't actually know that you have a sensitivity to it? There are some exceptions to the rule, and I think some people have some digestive issues that almost need support before the diet. But we do want to be very cautious of the supplements we're on because they can contain ingredients that we're testing. And so making sure they're professional practitioner grade supplements is like absolutely essential so that there's no hidden ingredients, and double checking those ingredients to ensure that every last one is approved in the elimination diet process.
I see. Okay. So I'm just sort of taking notes here. And as I do that, so this is what I've learned today. Just to sort of sum up the entire process. First of all, number one thing you need to do, let's say you're having a symptom, whatever it is. Number one thing that you need to do is to prepare mentally, right? Number two is you have to research practitioners who specialize in the elimination diet or maybe food sensitivities and all that. Then you need to decide who you resonate with. You decide on who to work with. And then the next step would be order testing. You can tell me like if I'm correct or if I'm wrong. And that's what I sort of logically, I think. You order the testing and then you go ahead with the protocol.
I would actually probably start with the protocol first because you get a good read on things within the first few weeks. And if the first few weeks doesn't produce the results you were looking for, then order the testing. Because some people don't, again, this is where client to client I've seen, if leaky gut syndrome is in fact present, then yeah, the testing would be something that we would want to order almost right off the bat. Someone who doesn't seem to have that many severe issues and it's just a more of a precautionary, maybe they have some headaches or skin issues and they want to see what they can do to resolve it, the testing may not even be necessary. Just simply removing the list of foods, their symptoms may disappear so clearly that we know that there's no further testing needed. And since the testing can be a little bit expensive, it's nice to save everybody a couple of dollars if we can.
Okay. So, okay, one last question. And I'm like, because I'm so curious about this topic.
Yeah.
I've heard that, you know how sometimes we get sort of like addicted to struggle and get used to living with the symptoms, even though we know something is not right, something is not quite right, but we still choose to ignore it. And that happens for years and years and years. And what I've heard and learned is that food sensitivities are actually crucial to pay attention to, because they have a very big effect on old age. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about that. If there is any known research showing links between food sensitivities and old age inflammatory mental diseases such as dementia or Alzheimer's or other things.
Sure. Yeah. So there's definitely research linking to that. Now, working with Alzheimer's and dementia is not my specialty overall, but I have definitely read a good bit of research supporting the reaction from food sensitivities leading to that long term. And what we see is things like essential fatty acids being hugely supportive in the prevention and therapy of things like Alzheimer's and dementia. And if we think about essential fatty acids as being an important therapy, one of the key reasons is because things like EPA are known as being an anti-inflammatory food, a supplement. If we're talking about something being anti-inflammatory, then what we have to realize is that there's inflammation present. And why is the inflammation present? And food sensitivities are one of the leading causes of inflammation in many people today, at least in the clients I've worked with and the research that I've read. So if we're exposed to food sensitivities for possibly our entire life, I mean, many people are born with food sensitivities that we don't know, and it wasn't even really a conversation. If you think about somebody who's maybe 80 right now and suffering from Alzheimer's or dementia, when they were a baby, when they were an infant, was the idea of food sensitivities even really something we talked about? No. So could they have been exposed to it their whole entire life? And so that inflammation over time impacted their brain function and led to something like Alzheimer's or dementia. Absolutely. And the research definitely does point to that.
Yeah. Okay. So any last words you'd like to share with moms who are in the trenches every single day? What are the things that we should be looking out for with our kids or with their own health?
I number one is keep going. You're doing amazing. I think that we sometimes are really hard on ourselves if we even so much to say, oh no, they reacted to this food and I should have known. It's okay. You shouldn't have known. It's not exactly what we're taught, but you know now, right? So take whatever steps you need to take and know that even if somebody makes you feel like it's in your head and it's normal and it's just something you deal with, if it's not okay with you, chances are there's a remedy out there for it. So find your community, find your practitioners, find the women to support you. Join a Facebook group that does support this. I know I have a Facebook group that I would love to invite you to join. I can share the link if you're interested, and find practitioners, read articles, fill your Pinterest boards, you name it. Just equip yourself with knowledge so that you can continue taking steps to support yourself and your family.
I love that. Okay. So I have 4 questions that I ask all my guests.
Okay.
And question number 1 is, this show is all about inspiring mothers to thrive as women and moms. And I like to call it's like being a goddess in your life. And I'm curious to know, how are you being a goddess in your own life? How do you take care of yourself, your soul, your body? What are some of your non-negotiables?
Oh, golly. Oh, such a good question. And one I'm probably not as good at as I should be. My non-negotiable for the summer is beach time. It's my happy place. My son is happy there. And so we have a couple of days a week that we block off for a morning at the beach. And it is unless it's raining and Mother Nature keeps me from getting outside, that's where we're going to be. So that's my non-negotiable for at least the summer months.
I love that. Okay. What advice does your now mommy self would have given to your pre-mommy self?
Enjoy the sleep while you can.
I love that. So honest and raw. I had a mom who said, "Don't do it." I love that. Yeah. All right. So I like to keep it real and show listeners that even though someone is an expert in one area, they might be struggling with other things. So what are some of your current challenges as a woman, wife, or mother?
Balance. I've always been somebody who loves my work, and it can't take up my whole life now, but I do sometimes struggle, not sometimes, always struggle with being the kind of mom I want to be, the kind of wife I want to be, and the kind of holistic nutritionist and business owner that I want to be, and finding that happy medium and house too. We wear a lot of hats. And so finding a balance and finding that compromise in various places where I can really fulfill each of those more than just adequately, but in a fulfilling and satisfying way.
Okay. I just have to throw in here, you have to listen to my second episode of my podcast. This is exactly where I talk about balance. You have to listen. And everybody else who's listening. Yeah. Okay. So what are some of your pet peeves?
Oh, you want to get me started now? We should be wrapping up.
Some of your most common ones.
Oh my goodness. There's so many. That's actually not true. I really don't have that many. Okay. I have one. Driving around where I live right outside of New York City, and driving around here is crazy. And so one of my big pet peeves is people who wait until the very, very end, like where you're getting ready to turn and they have the white line and they like jump over and cut you off and then they honk at you like it's your problem. And I'm like, man, that really creates for a stressful driving environment. And it's one of my biggest pet peeves. You have this huge turn lane you could have gotten over. So of course accidents do happen and we forget where we're going, but it's very frequent around here.
Yeah. You know, it's funny you're mentioning it. My husband shared with me today that apparently, I think Apple and Google are working on cars that would drive on their own.
Wow.
Like, oh, that can solve the accidents.
Yeah.
Okay. You just reminded me. Okay. Thank you so much. Before I let you go, can you talk about the blog post that you have written for my website and also about the freebie you've created for the community?
Yes. So the blog post does talk more about these food sensitivities and how you might look into whether or not you have one or more. And the freebie, the download that you can click is a list of signs and symptoms that it's not 100% inclusive, but it is a pretty well-rounded list that I've used with my clients for years. And if you've got even one of these symptoms, it might be worth exploring an elimination diet program.
Okay. And then can you also tell people how they can connect with you, the Facebook group, all of that?
Yeah. So you can, my website is yourwellhealth.com. You can come there. We have a blog with lots of great articles and resources. And we have a Facebook group. It's free to join. It's the Mom's Wellness Connection, or search Mom's Wellness Connection. Or you can actually go to www.momswellnessconnection.com and it will automatically send you to that Facebook group. And it's just a really great community with a lot of engagement and people posting recipes and questions. It's an open forum plus educational trainings, just all about supporting moms and doing just like what you've been talking about, just empowering them.
I love that. Okay, great. Thank you so much for spending the time with us. And I hope to connect with you on cyberspace.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Health Begins with Moms show. I love hearing from you, so please post your comments and questions over at healthbeginswithmom.com/podcast. If you love the show, please share it on social media and in your real life with other moms who might enjoy this content. And And if you have a burning question or topic you'd like me to hit on the show, just drop me a line at dorit@healthbeginswithmom.com. And if you love this show and really want to support it, please go to iTunes, write a review, and subscribe. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you next time. Much love and many blessings.